the videos, the responses, the movies, the reviews, the contests, the entries, the questions, the answers, the good, the bad, and the downright unusual. Hey everybody, this is my entry into the Good, the Bad, and the Unusuals. Oh, sorry, the Good, Bad, Unusuals contest. It's two people who make movie-related YouTube videos. They're holding a contest for people to make video responses to and talk about the weirdest movies that you have ever seen. So I have a few here that I'd like to mention. I actually watched Billy the Scumbag Hillbilly, and he mentioned both Naked Lunch and The Holy Mountain, and I would have probably mentioned both of those if he hadn't already. So, and also one I should probably mention right off the bat is the 1950s animated version of Alice in Wonderland by Disney. It's gloriously demented. But first I'm going to start with Slacker by Richard Linklater. This is a very unusual narrative. Basically, it doesn't follow one single character or a group of characters throughout the whole movie, but hops from one character to the next, to the next, to the next, and on and on. If you know Richard Linklater, I'm sure you've seen this film. It's his first feature-length movie. Some of the characters are weird, and some of them are fairly normal, but it's just an unusually structured movie. Never quite seen anything like it. So that would be my first mention. David Lynch, of course, makes lots of weird movies. I think his weirdest is Inland Empire. And unlike Mulholland Drive, which starts out is normal for like the first hour and a half and then gets weird, this is pretty much weird throughout the entire thing. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens in this movie that I don't understand. And I'm not sure David Lynch understands it as well. He shot the entire thing over the course of about 2 years, just on odd days here and there. Just whenever he could. He used a cheap little home video camera. He got Laura Dern, who was in both Blue Velvet and Wild at Heart, to be in it. And there's all kinds of stuff. There's a storyline involving her as an actress who's been cast in a movie with Justin Theroux, and Jeremy Irons is the director. And then reality and the narrative of the movie that they're making, they start to mesh with each other and become indistinguishable, which is, pretty standard for a Lynch film. But yeah, there's all kinds of stuff in this movie, just individual little scenes that you're just not sure what's going on. And there's a whole sequence where she's basically sitting and talking to a guy in some dingy little office. And who knows why she's there, and who knows why she's telling all this personal stuff to this guy who likes waffles, but other than that, you don't know anything about him. It's a really interesting film. It's long, 3 hours, and there's even more deleted scenes on the disc. I kept the disc for like 3 weeks when I rented it, just so I could study it. I don't know what's going on in here, but it's definitely a strange, an unusual movie, and not just because things look weird, which is the mistake that Tim Burton makes in a lot of his films. Soderbergh is one of my favorite directors. Steven Soderbergh made Sex, Lies, and Videotape, and then he went on to do a few studio pictures and really didn't like the experience. So before he got back into making films like Out of Sight and the Ocean's movies and Aaron Brockovich, what have you, he made a low-budget film called Schizopolis, which he stars in and plays the main character, at least two of them. And his wife is in it as well, playing his wife, and another guy plays two different characters, I think. All kinds of strange stuff happens in this movie. People speak in weird ways, and scenes get replayed in different ways again and again. And there's a guy who speaks in a foreign language for no apparent reason. And there's some character who's like dressed up like an exterminator, only he's just like a cocky guy and doesn't really do anything. And he's got like hangers on who are catered to his every whim. I don't really understand a lot of what's happening in this movie, but it's kind of fun. It's just crazy, kooky. You're not really sure what's happening. There's a point behind it if you look really closely. It's just odd. And I have to say, one of the things that's fun about this movie is there are no credits at all anywhere in this movie. Except for the very, very end, you have that title card, which shows the copyright date and has the disclaimer about how this is a work of fiction, not based on any person living or dead, and it flashes for like 1 second, and that's it. That's all the credits that you get. So that was kind of amusing. I'm cheating a little bit here because this is actually more like 4 movies. Tetsuo is a series of movies by a Japanese director called Shinya Tsukamoto, and they're called Tetsuo the Iron Man, Tetsuo 2 Body Hammer, and Tetsuo the Bullet Man, I believe. And basically, the main character is a guy who grows machine parts out of his body. It's nuts. It is a nutty series of movies, man. And the style is so kinetic, and the acting style is so extreme, and everything is just racing along at a fast pace and just like crazy. Half the scenes of the movie are guys growing like drills and cannons out of their body and going, wah! You know, it's nuts. It's really nuts. So if you haven't seen those, definitely want to take a look at those. Those are some odd pictures. Another one is Chinese Ghost Story, which I think was made in the 80s. This is another series, but I've only ever seen the first one. Basically, it's sort of a fantasy adventure, kind of a musical as well. It's kind of hard to categorize, but as far as I know, there isn't any, no CGI, of course, and there's also not a lot of optical compositing. All of the creatures are practical effects and done on the set or in camera, which makes for some really kind of strange looking effects. Normally you have a monster come along, it's like a stop motion monster that's been optically printed into the shot. They didn't do that in this movie, at least not that I can remember. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but it's unusual to be sure. Then we have Ocean's 12. I'm not sure if you've heard of this one before, but this is one in a series of films by a guy named, oh wait, you probably do know who this. Ocean's 12, of course, is the second in the George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Steven Soderbergh trilogy, and it doesn't get nearly as much praise as the other two, which is really strange because I don't know what people are smoking. They actually think that Ocean's 13 is funny. Ocean's 13 is a drag, especially for the first hour. Ocean's 12 is so much more fun. And one thing I like about it is that the style that it's shot in, the choices of music, the choices of camera moves and editing, very much in keeping with a particular style of 60s film that I became familiar with when a friend of mine showed me a lot of his favorite films from that era. And so I enjoyed that. But the thing that I enjoyed most about this movie is the way that they take a joke from the first from Ocean's 11, and they turn it upside down. In Ocean's 11, there's a scene where George Clooney and Brad Pitt walk out of a bar, basically, and there's all these paparazzi taking pictures of the television stars who are playing themselves. And the paparazzi all ignore George Clooney and Brad Pitt. And those guys, of course, get photographed more than anybody, except, of course, for Justin Bieber. So basically, it's sort of making a joke about how, despite the fact that these characters are very good looking and played by George Clooney and Brad Pitt, they don't actually resemble George Clooney and Brad Pitt, or at least George Clooney and Brad Pitt do not exist within the world of this movie. Kind of like how in Last Action Hero, Arnold Schwarzenegger walks into a video store and the Terminator is starring Sylvester Stallone, like that. Well, in Ocean's 12, they openly acknowledge that the characters bear a striking resemblance to famous people by having Julia Roberts play a character who impersonates Julia Roberts. As they were leading up to this gag, I thought, oh, wait a minute, they're not going to do that, are they? Yes, they are. That's great. I love that. That's really funny. And it is unusual, very unusual for a movie to do that. So I like it a lot. Finally, I'd like to mention Head. Head is a movie that came out in the 60s. It's directed by Bob Rafelson. It was co-written by Rafelson and Jack Nicholson, and it stars the Monkees. This was the feature film sort of version of their TV series, but they take in all kinds of really screwy directions. Mostly they make fun of the fact that they are what they call a manufactured pop group, basically picked for a television series, not a real rock group that formed on its own. And so they take that sort of concept and run with it. There's just lots of really goofy sketches. They run into people like Victor Mature, and Timothy, what's his name? Timothy Carey, and Frank Zappa, and there's songs in it. There's musical performances. There's a lot of fun stuff in it like that. But mostly it's just very weird. There's one scene I remember in which a couple of guys get captured and they get chained up to a wall, and the three guys are standing there all chained to this wall in like this dungeon. And Michael Nesmith turns to the other two and he says, "Now here's my plan." It's like he's about to tell how they're going to escape, right? And all of a sudden the wall moves and they're in a completely different scene in a bathroom talking to a bunch of police officers, and the chains are missing. Just kind of really strange stuff like that. They lead cheers for the Vietnam War, weird stuff like that. There's lots of archival footage spliced in there for some reason. It's odd. It's really odd. But it was the kind of movie that me and friends of mine really enjoyed when we discovered it in the early 90s. So if you haven't seen this one, it's definitely a strange cat. So that is my contest entry for the contest. I don't know if I've ever mentioned that. Yeah, The Good, the Bad, and the Unusual. They're holding a contest. They've got lots of cool DVD prizes. Yeah, if you haven't checked out their channel, please do so. I hope I'm not posting this too late. They didn't give an expiration date on the entries. But it's for people who make videos talking about the weirdest movies you've seen. So those are mine. Thanks very much. And, check the link below. Maybe you want to post a video of your own. Thanks. Take it easy.